Hello, Lee. I'm excited that you took my invite to join my Wall of Hope and Resilience. For those of you that are meeting Lee or even myself for the first time, we just decided that our journeys crossed 2017 at a brain injury conference in Portland. And I love Lee's story. I've heard it several times now, and it rings true to my heart. And I'm excited that he's able to share it with us. So, Lee.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and thank you so much for what you do. Special thanks should go out to All Things Are New Again, and Suzanne and Mindy for the wonderful things that you do. I met you at that conference. I think we actually met in 2018, but you were given an award for so many things that you had done in 2017. I say that because I had a stroke in October of 2017, and that's what began my journey. And I think I met you early in 2018, and it was a wonderful opportunity to meet you. We've collaborated on a few things already, and I'm sure that we'll collaborate on a lot more things in the future. You'll have a special place in my heart, obviously. Like Suzanne said, I'm Lee Glynn. Never expected to be here. This is like being a charter member of a club that you never wanted to join. In October of 2017, October 29th, which was International Stroke Day, believe it or not. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning on my farm. It was going to be just another day, I thought. It was about 5:30 in the morning. I was very anxious to get started. I wasn't normally an early riser, but I had an antique business and I had a fresh load of antiques that had arrived, and I was in the process of photographing and researching them, two things that make me very happy, and I couldn't wait to get started. So at 5:30 in the morning, my eyes popped open and I popped out of bed and headed for the bathroom to take a shower. When I flicked the light on, I'm right-handed, so I reached out and flicked the bathroom light on. I realized that I didn't feel the switch. And I looked at myself in the mirror and the side of my face was a little numb. And I turned and I went back into the bedroom and said to my spouse, I said, something is wrong. I'm going numb on my right side. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I can't feel my face. I can't feel my hand. My leg is numb. And wisely, she said, well, put some clothes on. And I was ready to take a shower. So I went back into the bathroom to dress and never got there. That stroke was ongoing. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub to put my socks on, and when I bent over, I kind of slumped down to the floor, and that's where she found me a few minutes later. We thought we were going to drive to the hospital. Instead, she had to call an ambulance, and I drifted in and out of consciousness. I would say that the stroke was very gentle, if it could be such a thing. I didn't feel any pain. I didn't really feel any fear. I didn't really know what was happening or what was about to happen, but I was pretty calm and just watched this thing unfold. Session I spoke, and my spouse and I spoke periodically during the wait for the ambulance. It was about 45 minutes for the ambulance to get there. And as I said, I'd drift in and out of consciousness, but it was all quite gentle. I don't remember much beyond that. They took me to the local hospital where they confirmed through a CAT scan imaging that I had indeed had a hemorrhagic stroke deep in my brain, in my basal ganglia, the thing that's responsible for like a switchboard for your brain. It takes and receives and passes on the messages. It's responsible for smooth movement. So I kind of walk very mechanically now. My movements are kind of mechanical, but I'm here. Anyway, they diagnosed it as a hemorrhagic stroke and said there's nothing we can do here at this little hospital, and they sent me to Portland, um, to an ICU there. I don't remember it. I don't remember. I remember one brief moment in the hospital in Skowhegan where I told the doctors that I would prefer to go south rather than north. It's I don't know what prompted that or or anything else, but that was the one interaction that I remember. There were people that came in and checked on family and friends, and but I don't remember any of that. They sent me to Portland, and that too. I remember little snippets on the day that I was being discharged from Portland to an acute rehab center in Augusta. I don't remember much. I was there for about a week, I think, and then into a rehab center. I guess my story really kind of starts there. Um, I had no idea what a stroke or a brain injury meant. I thought that when I became aware of myself and my circumstances, I didn't worry at all because I've always been a good patient. Whenever I've had a medical issue, we've gone to the doctor. The doctor has diagnosed it and taken corrective action. I had a heart attack back in the 2014 or 15, mild heart attack. Had a stent put in, and that was really my understanding of how things work. That when something goes wrong, it might be so wrong you have to go to the hospital, but they'll fix you up and send you off. And that was my anticipation with a brain injury. I was in a rehab center in Augusta at the Maine Medical, and they were trying to get me out of bed and teach me to walk again. They'd hang me from a sling and from the ceiling and let me move my legs and try to support myself. Um, I eventually, after a few weeks, I had moved to using a walker. I could push a walker and sort of shuffle along behind it. And they came in and told me I was going to be discharged in a few days. And that actually scared me. I was in no condition to be discharged. My gosh, I couldn't use the bathroom alone. I certainly couldn't dress myself or even sit up on the side of the bed. I needed assistance with everything. And I thought those things would all be resolved before they sent me home. I met with um, the neurosurgeon, Dr. Simon, and I said, Dr. Simon, what's the prognosis? What can I expect? And Dr. Simon, who's a very nice lady, shrugged her shoulders. She said, I don't know. Every brain injury is different. Of course, that wasn't what I wanted to hear. And so I went to one of my therapists, the speech therapist. I had a very good relationship with her, and I thought I could get a straight answer from her. And I said, after working with me for 2 or 3 weeks, you know me pretty well, see how hard I work at rehab. What do you think the prognosis is? Where do you see this going? And she said, I don't know. Every brain injury is differently. Well, of course, that wasn't what I wanted to be told. I wanted to be told that, well, you were going to give you this medication, and we're going to give you this, and you're going to improve to the point where you will be better. And nobody was saying that to me. I went to each one of my therapists in turn and said, hey, just give me a straight answer. Just tell me what you think. What's going to happen? And they all said the same thing. We don't know. Every brain injury is differently, which it is. But now it has been 3.5 years. Now I understand some things that I didn't understand before. And I'd like to share those with you. I guess one of the most painful things was coming out of that hospital without knowing exactly where I was going to go. By that, I mean, I came home in a wheelchair, unable to walk, um, into a great big old farmhouse that I loved, that I had thought would be my forever home, quite frankly. And now all of a sudden I was trying to maneuver a wheelchair left-handed because my right hand was didn't work at that point, and and I was on shag carpeting. And you can imagine the difficulty of pushing your wheelchair around one-handed on shag. They sent home health people into the house to continue my rehabilitation. Um, and I waited until I had a relationship with each of those people, and then I posed those same questions to them. What's going to happen? What can I expect? And I'll be darned if they didn't say the same. It was like everybody was reading from the same script. We don't know. Each brain injury is different. We have no idea how well you're going to do. And it just ran counter to what I thought. While this was going on, I'm about 5 weeks or 6 weeks in, and I guess the best way to describe my my mood or my thought process at that time was, if you're familiar with the 7 stages of grief, that probably was my story at the time. For those not familiar, the 7 stages of grief are, the first one is shock and denial. Well, I had certainly experienced that. And then a pain and guilt, followed by anger and bargaining, and then depression, followed by an upward turn, a reconstruction and working through until finally you reach acceptance and hope. I guess if someone were going to provide me with a roadmap of what to expect with a brain injury, that is exactly what I would give them. But I wouldn't just give it to you. I'd want to explain what goes along with each of those steps, because you will live it and you will learn it just like I did, I'm sure. Uh, there's no way to sugarcoat this, and I'm just going to lay it right on the table. Um, by the time I got home from the hospital, I was deeply depressed. I realized pretty clearly at that point just how badly hurt my brain was. And I had a pretty good idea of what that was going to mean in terms of my life going forward. And it was not a pretty picture. Um, I wanted to end it. I thought I had had a very good life. I I'd had an opportunity to travel. I had children. I had grandchildren, and I thought I had run a pretty good race. And I wanted to leave now. I didn't want to live like this. I didn't want to live and be a burden, and I certainly didn't want to live and be confined to my home in a wheelchair. The worst things I ever, I'm sorry, one of the worst things that I ever did was I begged my youngest daughter to give me back my handgun. They had taken all my guns and all of anything that I could hurt myself away from the house. And I begged my youngest daughter to please get Dad his handgun. Just awful. Just an awful thing to do. But you see, it was part of that roadmap, those 7 steps. Um, there's no way that I can keep anyone else from going through it. You have to go through it. You have to walk through the fire in order to get to the other side. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. I eventually moved from home health, outpatient rehabilitation here in Skowhegan at that same hospital that I went to that morning. And before I started with the 3 therapists who would be working with me, I asked for a half-hour meeting to get to know one another, to which they agreed. And when we sat down in that room, I told them the story of Dr. Simon and my therapist in the hospital, and of my therapist that came to the house, and of my disappointment because nobody said, here's a roadmap. This is what you're going to go through. This is how you're going to come out. Nobody did that. Everybody said the same thing. Brain injuries are all individual. There's no way to tell you. And I said, I'm looking for a cheerleader. I'm looking for someone that'll be on my side through thick and thin, that'll go through this with a positive attitude. Her name is Katie Richardson. She's about 5 feet tall. And she stood up that day and she said, yes, you can do it. You can get better. It's hard. It's going to hurt. There's going to be a lot of disappointment, but you can do it, and I'll do it with you. And I coined a phrase for Katie Richardson in the following weeks as she made good on her promise. I called Katie Richardson a hope broker. And that was exactly what I needed. I needed somebody that understood this process, somebody that had seen a couple hundred other people go through it, to look at me, to look me in the eye and say, you can do it, and I'll go there with you. What a difference that makes. What a difference. I learned so many, I relearned so many things at Katie's elbow. It was crazy. Suddenly, the improvements started to add up. The improvements started to compound. After only a few weeks, I would get dropped off at rehab. I'd do my 1 hour or 2 hours, depending on which day it was. And then I would walk. Yeah, I would walk with no cane, no AFO. I would walk 1 mile home. Oh, it took me an hour to get there. Don't think this is some big physical feat. Wasn't a miracle. But I could walk all by myself all the way home, nearly 1 mile. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. You know what that did? It allowed me to believe that I could do more. It didn't cure the depression. You ever hear that song, going through the big D, and I don't mean Dallas. Yeah. It was written about divorce, but I used to sing that to myself because that's where I was. I mean, I was still depressed. My goodness. I went at 64 years old. I went from vigorous, happy, and healthy to not vigorous, happy, and healthy anymore. I mean, it was a huge change. Don't get me wrong. It didn't fix everything to be able to walk that mile. But what it did do was it gave me hope. Now I had Katie Richardson and myself, giving me hope. The big turning point for me in those 7 steps, right? Shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargain, and depression. The next step after depression is an upward turn. And that's so prophetic. That's exactly what happened. I realized that I needed to talk to somebody. I realized that my mindset, it was an inside job. It was me, but I needed some insight and some professional help. I called my insurance agent, my insurance, health insurance liaison, they call her. And I told her honestly what was going on. I said, I want to kill myself. I don't want to live like this. And she hooked me up with a psychiatrist or a psychologist or somebody with a bunch of letters after his name. And I went and talked with him. He was an awful nice man. Spent an hour talking to him, paid him for the hour, and came out of there really not feeling much different. There was no real connection between he and I. He gave me some different tricks, I call them, things that I could do when I was feeling especially low, things that I could do to get me through. But really, that didn't help that much. And I thought, if I could talk to somebody else that's had a brain injury or a stroke or somebody that's worn these shoes, maybe I could learn from them. So I went looking for a support group. I lived in Skowhegan. I called the local hospital and told them that I'd like to attend a support group for brain injury or stroke patients. And they said, we don't have one. So I called Augusta, where I'd done the acute rehab, and said, I need to join a support group for brain injuries and strokes. And they said, oh, we don't have one meeting at this time. We used to have one, but it kind of fizzled out. Wow. I called the Inland Hospital in Waterville. Someone thought they might have one. And they said, no, we don't have one. We used to, but it kind of fizzled out. I finally found a support group that was meeting with the help of Northern Light in Brewer. And on the Wednesday when they were meeting, Sasha drove me to Brewer and helped me walk into the meeting. And that was a tremendous turning point for me. We all introduced ourselves, and then we just kind of talked in general terms about what was going on with us. And I found myself sitting there and listening, but also comparing. I compared myself to the guy sitting next to me or to the lady across from me. And I could see all the similarities between our conditions. And I could also see the differences. And I realized that I was very fortunate, that I was better off than some people. And of course, I was worse off than some people. But I found myself within a group of people that I didn't have to explain to them what was going on with me. They knew. They had already been there. They had already walked that path that I was just starting out on. What a difference that made. What a big difference that made. I came out of that meeting 1 hour later, and I honestly felt like the weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I I I felt positive, I felt energized, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to start a support group here in town. And I did. 3 weeks later, the local church let us use their meeting room, and we had our first Skowhegan brain injury support group. and with all three people, myself and two others that came to that first meeting. And we continued to do those meetings. We eventually moved to the library, and we're having some pretty good sized meetings. And the hospital in Augusta called and said, well, since you're doing it there, would you like to restart the one here in Augusta? And I said, I sure would. Are you kidding? And the next month, the Augusta Brain Injury Support Group started up or restarted up. And then Inland Hospital called and they said, would you be willing to do the same thing in Waterville? I believe it or not, they wouldn't give me a room to meet in, but City Hall offered to let us use their conference room, and we started doing the support group in Waterville as well. Within 6 months, we had 3 support groups running, and I had an epiphany. I wasn't thinking about me anymore, and I was feeling pretty good about it. I was feeling energized, I was feeling powerful, and I was feeling like maybe I made a difference for somebody else that found themselves in the same spot. Here's a couple of little tips from me to you. The first one is you are responsible for your rehab. And I'll take that a step further. Now, naturally, you're going to have somebody walking you through it and a therapist working with you. If it's to be, it's up to me. I have to be in the right frame of mind. I have to be engaged, energetic, and willing. Those things will make up the mindset that will help you overcome what you need to overcome. The second word of wisdom, and this one is not going to be as well received, I'm afraid, but I'm going to give it to you right between the eyes. At some point in your recovery, sorry, my nose is running. At some point in your recovery, you're going to believe that there must be a secret method, a magical shot, a prayer that someone can say over you. You're going to start to look, as we all do, for that thing that will make you better. Maybe it's the shot in the back of the neck from a quack down in Florida. It's hard to say. But at some point, you're going to say to yourself, there must be an easier way. There isn't. The only way through this is with your hard work and a professional. There's no shortcut. Prayer is good. Vitamins are good. But what's going to make you better is you. You've got to own it. You've got to take the bull by the horns and say, I'm going to get better. I'm sorry that this is that you're going through this. But I want you to know that you are traveling the path that others have traveled before you, and that there are very few of us that have ever been down this path that wouldn't do anything we could to help. That's why I'm making this video. Maybe someday I can be considered a hope broker, along with Katie Richardson and Suzanne Morneau. Maybe I'll be a hope broker. Brought some hope to you. I hope so. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. If there's anything I can ever do for you, please let me know. Suzanne, back to you.